I keep coming back to that photograph. Harry and Meghan walking into the David Foster Foundation Gala in Canada on 8 August 26. Side by side, shoulders close. The kind of arrival that makes the front page because it looks like everything is fine. And maybe it was fine in that moment. Maybe the smiles were real, the proximity was genuine, and the evening was exactly what it appeared to be. A couple attending a charity event together. Nothing more complicated than that. But behind the stage, 2 cars were already running. 2 sealed itineraries sat on 2 dashboards printed on Sussex letterhead, each one mapping a different route out of the venue. One pointed toward Vancouver, the other pointed toward Toronto. By morning, the couple who walked in together would be on opposite sides of the country. And the person who arranged that separation was not a stranger, not an outsider, not a hostile tabloid editor manufacturing drama from a distance. It was someone on their own payroll, someone who controlled their schedule, their travel, and their access to the charities that funded both routes. Someone whose entire compensation structure depended on those routes remaining separate. That is the contradiction worth sitting with today. A joint arrival photograph pinned over a system designed to split the couple the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Not a spontaneous disagreement, not a scheduled conflict that emerged at the last minute over breakfast. A pre-planned separation engineered by an advisor who had been doing exactly this for months and had built a financial architecture around keeping it going. The question is not whether Harry and Meghan attended the gala together. They did. ABC News reported it, multiple photographs confirm it, the guest list confirms it. Nobody disputes the arrival. The question is what happened in the hours between the last photograph and the first car pulling away from the curb. And the answer, genuinely, is worse than most people would guess. It involves sealed envelopes, donor threats, and a consultant who was paid to keep the couple apart. To understand how you get 2 sealed itineraries after a joint gala arrival, you have to understand the 2 teams operating inside the Sussex household. And I mean 2 teams in the most literal sense, not 2 departments in the same organisation sharing notes over coffee. 2 separate operational units with different goals, different communication chains, different reporting structures, and fundamentally different definitions of what a successful day looks like for the people they serve. On one side, there is what I am going to call the commercial independence faction. This is the group of advisors, brand consultants, communication strategists, and operations staff whose primary job is protecting and growing Meghan's independent commercial identity. They view every public appearance through one lens. Does this protect the brand or does it complicate it? They had a brand launch scheduled for the morning after the gala. It required Meghan in Vancouver by 9 o'clock. The meetings were confirmed weeks in advance. The venue was booked. A media strategy had been drafted. Contractual obligations with commercial partners were already signed. The launch had its own timeline, its own stakeholders, and its own financial consequences for delay. This was not a casual breakfast meeting. This was a revenue-generating enterprise with legal deadlines attached. On the other side, there is the family reconciliation faction. These are the advisors, intermediaries, and trusted confidants working on Harry's ongoing and complicated relationship with the institution he left. They view every scheduled decision through a different lens entirely. Does this bring Harry closer to resolution, or does it push the family further apart? They had arranged a private call with a senior royal intermediary for the same morning the brand launch was scheduled. It required Harry in Toronto in a secure and vetted location at a specific hour that had taken weeks of delicate back-channel negotiation to lock down. The intermediary had conditions, the window was narrow, and the reconciliation team was genuinely afraid that any schedule change, any hint that Harry might not be available at the agreed time, would collapse the window entirely and set the process back by months. Both events were real. Both mattered deeply to the people involved, and both had been scheduled by people who knew the other event existed and chose to let the collision happen rather than resolve it. That is the relationship wound at the center of this entire story, and it is worth naming directly. Public unity keeps being used to conceal how competing advisors divide the couple's private priorities. The gala photograph showed one thing, the sealed itineraries showed another, and the gap between those 2 realities was not an accident or an oversight or a communication failure between 2 busy calendars. It was a feature of how the household was being managed, because the person who sat between both factions had a material interest in keeping them apart. The person sitting between those 2 factions was a private strategy consultant. I want to be specific about what this role involved. because it matters enormously for what comes next. This was not a scheduler. This was not a personal assistant managing a shared Google Calendar and sending polite reminder emails. This consultant controlled three things simultaneously: the Sussex travel logistics, the Sussex charitable donor relationships, and the access permissions that connected those donors to both Harry and Meghan's public appearances. In practical terms, this one person decided who rode in which car, who appeared at which event, and which charity partners received confirmation that a Sussex presence was guaranteed at their next fundraiser. The consultant approved travel budgets, managed advance teams, and held the relationships with donor coordinators at every foundation the Sussexes worked with. That is a remarkable concentration of power for someone whose name the public has never heard, whose contract the public has never seen, and whose incentive structure the couple themselves may not have fully understood until the gala evening forced them to look at it. The night before the gala, the consultant sat in a hotel suite with a laptop and a printer. The room service tray from dinner was still on the side table, the coffee cup half empty, the television was on mute, cycling through Canadian news coverage of the gala preparations. And on the desk, two itineraries were taking shape. Separate car services were booked through different agencies, so no single driver would see both routes or know that a second itinerary existed. Separate pickup times were assigned, staggered by 40 minutes to avoid the couple crossing paths at the curb. The first itinerary sent Meghan to a waiting vehicle immediately after the gala's formal close, routing her to a private airfield for the Vancouver connection. The second itinerary kept Harry at the venue for a brief post-event conversation with foundation staff, then sent him by a different car and a different route to a Toronto-bound departure point. Both itineraries were sealed in envelopes marked with the recipient's first name. Both carried typed instructions not to share the route with the other team. And here is the detail that genuinely matters. While those two itineraries were being printed, while the envelopes were being sealed, the consultant also drafted a joint social media message for the Sussex accounts, celebrating the couple's unified attendance at the gala. The message used the word together 3 times. Unity for the cameras, division for the morning. That is not a scheduling choice, that is architecture. Now, here is where the friction begins. And it starts with a torn envelope. Harry found his sealed itinerary in the back seat of the car. He broke the seal. He read the route, he read the pickup time, he looked at the itinerary number printed in the upper corner and realized there was a second one because his was marked 2 of 2. And he asked the driver a question that changed the shape of the evening. Who authorized the second vehicle? The driver did not know. The driver had received instructions through the car service dispatch, not through the Sussex office directly. The driver could not even confirm who had booked the second car. Harry called his own team and asked for the full calendar. Not his calendar, not his itinerary, the full calendar. Both schedules side by side, printed or emailed or read aloud over the phone, so he could see what the morning actually looked like from both directions. When he saw the two routes laid out together, with the staggered pickup times and the separate agencies and the sealed envelopes and the instructions not to share, he refused the second car. He told his team he was not getting into a separate vehicle. He stood beside that car at the gala exit, the overhead parking lot, catching the torn envelope in his hand, and he said no. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly, in a voice that the driver later described as very quiet and very certain. No, I am not doing this. I am not getting in a separate car from my wife. Meghan, when she was informed of Harry's refusal, defended the launch commitment. She had obligations. The brand partners were expecting her in Vancouver. The contractual deadlines were real, and the financial consequences of missing them were real. She ordered the first car held at the curb and told her team the commercial schedule would proceed as planned. Her position was not unreasonable. Her commitments were genuine. And from her vantage point at that moment, the split looked like a practical solution to competing professional demands. So now you have Harry refusing to split, Meghan defending her schedule, and somewhere between them, a consultant whose entire system depends on both cars leaving on time and on separate routes. And this is where the story turns, because what surfaces next changes everything about who was actually running their schedule. If this is landing for you, drop a like. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps. The David Foster Foundation organisers contacted Meghan's team directly. They did not go through the consultant. They did not use the usual Sussex coordination channel. They called Meghan's chief of staff on a personal number and forwarded a set of emails they had received from the strategy consultant in the days before the gala. The email said this: if both separate routes did not proceed as scheduled, the consultant would withdraw Sussex donor access from the foundation's upcoming fundraising events. The phrasing was specific and it was deliberate. The consultant did not threaten to cancel an appearance. The consultant did not say Harry and Meghan might not attend a future event. The consultant threatened to withdraw the Sussex name from donor access arrangements that channeled significant charitable funding through the foundation's annual cycle. The foundation organisers, understandably alarmed because their annual fundraising cycle depended on that donor pipeline, forwarded every email in the thread to Meghan's people and asked a direct question: does this represent an official Sussex position? Is this what the Duke and Duchess want? Or is this one consultant acting alone? It did not. Harry confronted the consultant at the gala exit. The cars were still idling, the foundation staff was still inside. The exchange, as it has been described to people close to the situation, went roughly like this. The consultant said the split itinerary was designed to protect both careers. Harry asked who had authorised threatening a charity to protect a calendar. The consultant said donor relationships required active management. Harry said a marriage is not a donor relationship. There was a pause, the kind of pause where both people understand that a line has been crossed and neither one is willing to pretend it has not been. I want you to hear those 4 lines again because they contain the entire story. Protect both careers. Who authorised threatening a charity? Donor relationships require management. A marriage is not a donor relationship. That exchange captures the entire architecture of the problem. The consultant had built a system where charitable access, travel logistics, and the couple's daily schedule were all controlled by the same person. And that person used the dependencies between those 3 things as leverage to enforce compliance. If Meghan wanted the brand launch, the consultant could arrange it, but only if the split itinerary held. If Harry wanted the reconciliation call, the consultant could facilitate it, but only through a separate car and a separate route. The system worked because both factions needed the consultant's access to function. The system collapsed the moment the foundation emails made the coercion visible to the people being coerced. That is the midpoint, and the meaning of the split changes completely when you cross it. Before the emails surfaced, you could tell yourself this was a busy couple managing different professional obligations. Couples do that every day. It is normal, it is healthy, it is not a scandal. After the emails, you cannot tell yourself that anymore. The split was not organic, it was not a natural consequence of competing schedules. It was engineered by someone who had a financial interest in the division, continuing, and who used charitable donor access as the enforcement mechanism to make sure it did. When Meghan learned that the consultant had used her brand launch, her name, her commercial commitments to threaten the charity organisers, she stopped defending the split. That is a genuine meaning change, not a softening of position, not a diplomatic compromise reached after a long conversation. A reversal. The launch commitment was real and it mattered to her professionally, but it did not matter more than discovering that someone on her own staff had weaponized it against a charity to preserve a scheduling system that served the consultant's interests, not hers. I want to talk about the money for a moment because it reframes the consultant's behaviour from personality to incentive. The calendar contract for a Sussex strategy consultant of this level was worth a reported mid-6-figure annual fee. The donor access it controlled channeled millions in charitable funding across multiple foundation partnerships throughout the year. When you understand those numbers, you understand why the consultant fought to keep the split itinerary alive even after Harry refused the second car. Every joint appearance reduced the number of separately billable logistics events. Every merged calendar day eliminated a separate car booking, a separate advance team, a separate briefing package, a separate expense report, a separate coordination fee. The split was not just a scheduling preference, it was a revenue model, and the revenue model required division. A scheduling aide who worked alongside the consultant has confirmed that the divided itinerary system was not new. It was not invented for the gala. It had been operating for months across multiple public appearances, quietly and without anyone on either faction questioning why 2 cars always seemed to be waiting. The consultant had been splitting Harry and Meghan's post-event schedules as a matter of routine, using donor relationships as leverage to keep both factions compliant with the divided calendar and to prevent either side from asking the obvious question, why are we not riding together? The gala was not the first time 2 cars waited behind a stage with 2 sealed envelopes on 2 dashboards. It was simply the first time someone opened the envelope early enough to read the second route and ask who authorized it. Here is the verdict, and I want to say it plainly because it deserves plain language. An advisor who manufactures unity for cameras while dividing a marriage calendar by morning is not protecting a brand. They are not managing logistics. They are not serving the couple's best interests. They are running a control operation, and the foundation emails prove it was not subtle or ambiguous or open to interpretation. The consultant tied donor access to the divided schedules with the casual confidence of someone who had done it before and expected to do it again without consequence. Harry refused the second car. Meghan joined him in cancelling the split route, and the consultant was removed. Specifically, the strategy consultant lost the Sussex calendar contract, the donor access privileges, and the authority over both travel teams. That is the price. It is visible, it is specific, it is concrete. The person who built the division lost the 3 tools that made division possible. Royal commentator Victoria Arbiter put it this way when the outlines of this story began to surface. What you are describing is not staff management, it is a control structure and a household that tolerates. It is a household that has lost sight of whose calendar it actually is. That is the sharpest version of this reading, and I think she is right. Unity was never the plan. Control was. The plan required keeping the couple apart in ways that generated separate logistics, separate billing, and separate donor commitments. The division was not a side effect of bad management. It was the product. It was what the consultant was selling. And it worked quietly and profitably until a charity organisation decided to forward the receipts to the people whose name was being used as leverage. Now, the generous reading. And I think it is worth hearing because it is not absurd, it is not dishonest, and it captures something true about how modern professional couples actually operate. Separate appearances could have been normal professional planning. A couple with different careers, different obligations, and different professional networks might reasonably need 2 cars after a charity event. That happens in ordinary marriages every week, and nobody writes a story about it. If the emails had never surfaced, you could construct a perfectly reasonable version of this story where the consultant was simply doing their job efficiently. Scheduling is not a crime. Logistics management is not coercion. Protecting a client's commercial obligations by arranging separate transport is not, on its face, an act of manipulation. But the donor pressure emails make the coercive design visible. When you threaten to withdraw charitable access unless a married couple stays on separate itineraries, you have crossed the line from scheduling into control. And once you have crossed it, the distinction between professional planning and systemic manipulation collapses completely. I keep coming back